Sue again.
But Sue, are you hearing this? We have some technical difficulty. I'm not sure if we're live yet or not.
Soon as we hear from Basu or Andrew. Okay.
Sorry about that. We are live.
Thank you. Call to order a regular meeting for the Normal Town Council for Monday, July 20th, 2020. Please call the roll.
Mayor Coos.
Here.
Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
Ms. Cummings.
Here.
Mr. Nord.
Here.
Ms. Smith.
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Here.
Mr. Preston.
We'll begin with a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we begin, I'm reminded to make this statement. The governor has issued a disaster declaration related to the public health concerns caused by the statewide COVID-19 pandemic. As mayor, I've determined that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent because of the risk of exposure to COVID-19 virus stemming from an indoor gathering, and that the remote meeting is the best interest of the health, safety, and welfare of the council, the staff, and the general public. We have had, in my last check, no request for public comment. Is that accurate, Ms. Honka?
That's correct. No public comment.
No public comment. We go to the omnibus agenda, items considered routine, and will be handled with a single vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion.
Move approval.
Mr. Nord.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to pull B, C, D, E, F, G, H.
Don't want to take a shot at I?
Nope.
Okay. Please call the roll. We have a motion for approval from Mr. McCarthy. A second, please.
Second.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy.
Aye.
Ms. Cummings.
Aye.
Mr. Nord.
Aye.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Aye.
Mr. Preston.
Aye.
Mayor Coos.
Aye. We've approved the minutes of the two public hearings on July 6, 2020, and approved the minutes of the regular council meeting of July 6, 2020. And we've approved a resolution considering the release of executive session minutes for June 19th, 2017, February 18, 2019, April 15th, 2019, and December 16th, 2019. Brings us to item B, a report to receive and file town of normal expenditures for payment as of July 15, 2020. Mr. Nord.
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Nord.
My first question has to do with an expense to pay the stormwater fees for 305 Pine Street. And this is a property that the town rents. And I understand that the council approved this lease and that the city manager is just tasked with implementing what was approved. But the town receives approximately $120 for the year for this rental. And in this lease, it states that taxpayers pay for the property taxes, repairs, lawn service, snow removal, and specific utilities. Now, taxpayers even pay for a replacement rental should the property not become inhabitable. But when I looked through the lease that Ms. Reese had forwarded in the agreement, It doesn't state that taxpayers pay for the stormwater fees as well. So that's not explicitly stated, and yet we're paying for those. So my request, we don't have to decide this now, is that somebody relook at that lease, see if this is something we should be paying, and if it's not, recoup those fees back.
Is this, no,
Done, Mr. Nord. Next
And
item.
then the next item on there is there's a charge for $7,250 for a new furnace at 104 West North. This is another leased property, which again, the council had approved. We've approved it for, or the council approved it for $2 a year for the rental. In order for taxpayers to recoup this cost, it needs to be rented without any additional expenses for 3,625 more years. And my request is that when this lease comes back up for renewal, that the council is made aware so we can decide if we would like to change that.
Point of order here, Mr. Mayor. We're going way off receive and file to matters of policy, asking us for future policy discussions. This can all be handled offline, and all of these questions so far have been asked ahead of time in an email that we were all received and Mr. Nord got answers to. So again, this is to receive and file, and we specifically changed this language and agreed to a policy change of how we handled these. And so if there's a specific challenge to a specific dollar amount, but these are policy questions. And we agreed that that's not what this point is for. If Mr. Nord has policy items that he wants to bring up in comments, that opportunity has been explained several times, but we continue to develop into policy matters when this is received and filed.
Thank you. Mr. Nord, do you have anything further?
No, those were my only two.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Ms. Cummings?
Did you say Ms. Cummings?
I did.
Oh, aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye, the item is approved. Item C is a resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement with the Illinois State Historic Preservation Office for a Community Development Block Grant Program environmental reviews. Mr. Nord?
I so move.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Nord?
I know council has received these questions, but for public education and to kind of further clarify, I'm going to ask some of these again and to make sure that I understand correctly. But Ms. Reese had mentioned from our emails that I understand there's not been a problem thus far utilizing the state's current process. Is that accurate, Ms. Reese?
Mr. Nord, I will try to answer that. I also have asked Mercy Davison to be on the call if you have specific questions about this. So I'll start and Mercy can jump in. I guess in terms of if we have it, I'm trying to think your phrasing. I think you asked if we've had any problems, and I guess the problems that we're experiencing in the current situation is unnecessary delays in waiting for the state to respond to these historic preservation reviews. So that delay gets eliminated when we can start doing this in-house. And Ms. Davison, if you would care to jump in and supplement.
Sure. The only thing I'd add is that up to this point, the delay has mostly pertained to sidewalk projects, and it does add unnecessary time. These sidewalks are being built in areas where there really isn't an impact on historic resources. It just takes the state the full 30 days to tell us what we already know. When we move into doing more projects with CDBG funding, particularly housing rehab, that 30-day delay will be a bigger problem for us. So approving this programmatic agreement will really help us expedite projects that are meant for local residents.
Okay, thank you. That's new. I actually the response that I received was that we didn't have any problems in the past. And then upcoming projects, from what I understand, it'll be a delay, and that's what we're trying to avoid.
Yes.
Is there additional staff time that this is going to take, or cost, or any risk or training that we're going to have by taking this on?
There's no additional training required. Taylor Long, the associate planner, already handles a lot of the paperwork required for this. That won't change. So we already have to do most of the paperwork that's required for each one of these projects. The state portion of it is something he can fold into that existing process quite easily. So it will add a small amount of additional time, but the overall benefit will be worth it.
Okay. And we do have ample staff time available to take this request on?
Question asked and
Yeah,
answered.
Okay.
Question asked and answered.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Smith on this item. Mr. Nord will come back to you if you have others.
I had asked some follow-up questions to Ms. Reese as well. And my understanding was that the current, and I'm having to look to my right to get my notes, the current state process is typically taking 30 days. The expectation is that this will be cut down to 7 days with the staff doing it. There's 2 individuals in-house capable and skilled at this process, so that there's not a situation where there would be a loss of time because of vacations. And so there would be coverage that exists. And since these programs are involving projects that are time sensitive, and part of the CDBG and the new process with the emphasis on sidewalks and how they interconnect to our expanding ADA bus stop compliance and incorporating the sidewalk infrastructure, I think there is much to be said for shaving that time off of this and making the process more efficient. So I'm all for this. Thank you.
Ms. Lorenz?
I'd like to echo that from Ms. Smith. Really, this is no budget impact. It is a removal of bureaucracy, a layer of bureaucracy, you could say. I think this is a win for the taxpayer and certainly some of the most vulnerable of our community. So I would support this wholeheartedly.
Ms. Lorenz, if you could tweak your volume up just a tiny bit, that would be helpful. Mr. McCarthy.
Yeah, at the risk of piling on, I see the same. Basically, we're shortcutting the circuit of red tape to help our citizens. I mean, if that isn't a great task that we can do as a city council, serve in the interests of our people who elected us to be here and help support them, I don't know what is. So I'm fully supportive of helping out our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Further on this item. Mr. McCarthy, if you'd lower your hand, thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz, Mayor Kus.
Aye. The resolution is approved. Item D is a resolution to award the bid for the Oak Street Water Main Replacement Project to George Gilmer Incorporated at a total cost of $545,000 or $545,600, plus up to a potential $15,000 bonus for early completion. Mr. Nord.
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Nord.
This one I have no discussion on. I inadvertently said that one.
Thank you. Further on this item? Please call the roll.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The resolution to award the bid is approved. Item E is a resolution to award the replacement bid for the replacement of a standby emergency generator for the West Booster Station to Wilcox Electric at a total cost of $119,900 and authorizing an associated budget adjustment of $19,900. Mr. Nord?
Thank you. My question for this is more for public education. Ms. Reese?
Approval, please.
Oh, I so move.
Do we have
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Nord.
Mike, thank you. My comment for this is more for public education. This generator is expensive and it probably still has value left for it. Ms. Reese had mentioned that in the past, these have been taken to an auction so that we could recoup costs. Could you just speak to that and how residents or people that are watching would be able to keep an eye on this item?
Ms. Reese, before you do, I have a question. It's probably an accounting question. This generator is 37 years old. I know how it would operate, how it would be handled in my business. So I guess my question for Mr. Kuhn is there any basis left in this, or is it completely depreciated?
That item would likely be completely depreciated off of our books at this point in time.
Thank you.
Depends on the useful life, but it would certainly exceed that.
I think that's germane to the discussion here. Ms. Reese, go right ahead.
Okay, in terms of Mr. Nord's question, it's about a $100,000 piece of equipment that's 37 years old. So what we would do with it is the last time we disposed of a generator, we would do something similarly, take it to an auction house and they would auction it off. I do want to point out that might be useful information. Mr. Burkhart is on the line and he can certainly supplement these comments, but the generator is so old it is difficult to get replacement parts. So certainly if we can't rely on the generator to function and keep the West Booster Station going, that is risk to water distribution, water service to our customers. So that is why we are asking council to authorize the replacement of this generator. In specifically in regard to Mr. Nord's comment, Mr. Burkhart has knowledge of the auction house and what that process is in terms of disposal. John, are you on the call?
Yes. So in the past, the generator that you were talking about was when we replaced the standby generator at the treatment plant. The contractor loads that onto a trailer for us. That's part of their contract. We coordinate with the Public Works Department for the transportation of it down. The previous generator we sold at the auction house in Clinton. It's probably the biggest auction house that's closest. At least twice a year, they have a utility equipment auction where they auction off a lot of old power supply trucks, various other equipment that municipalities or other utility companies have. We feel that it is a good fit to get it on that auction listing. They take care of all the publication and advertising for that auction as well. It's just a matter of us delivering it to them and they handle everything else.
Thank you very much. The extra word of mouth advertising hopefully will help recoup some of the expense for replacing it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further on this item? Ms. Smith.
I was also curious about this particular item, and Ms. Reese had notified me that this particular generator had gone into operation in 1983 to put those 37 years into perspective. And the typical life expectancy of a piece of equipment such as this is 25 to 30 years. So it survived 7 years beyond that. I suspect that the auction will not be very lucrative since it is difficult to get parts. But I appreciate the towns making the effort to have some recovery of cost of a fully depreciated and a generator that gave its all for us. Thank you.
Further on this, please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings, Aye. Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The item is approved. Item F is a resolution authorizing a contract with Air Construction Incorporated for the 2020 sanitary and storm sewer cleaning and televising contract in the amount of $411,644.40 Mr. Nord?
I so move.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Nord?
Thank you. A question first. This is coming, or a bulk of this is coming out of the sanitary sewer fees. Were those fees recently raised as well?
Yes, the sewer fee increase, I think was effective July 1st.
Okay. And this one we had budgeted over an additional $217,000, which I know I've asked this before, but that surplus, how is that going to be identified in the budget? Does that just go to reserves now, or what happens with that?
Sure. The savings, when a project is bid, if it comes in under budget, those savings are retained in the fund balance, and they're available to spend on a future project or to reallocate as council desires.
Okay, but they stay within that fund.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Ms. Smith?
Yes, just for the record, how many bids did we get on this project? Were there not a total of 3?
That is correct, Ms. Smith. We did receive 3 bids on this project. The one that we are asking council to award is $411,000 plus to Hair Construction. The other 2 bidders of National Power and GA Rich, both of those were good bids, but they were more expensive than Hair, and those 2 bids were actually over budget.
So we succeeded in this particular instance in having a contractor come to the town with a bid under what had been budgeted, despite the fact that we had 2 bids that were over budget. So I just wanted to make sure that we celebrate the fact that as a town, we have succeeded in attracting, in this instance, a lower bid than had been budgeted. And although the rates were increased recently, if I don't have the whole budget in front of me, but if it off the top of your head, I don't know if it's Miss Reese, Mr. Hahn, or Wayne, what's the total amount of the sewer budget on an annual basis?
Well, that's a good question. We'll see if Mr. Aldrich has the amount on top of his head.
It's as we have identified in our sanitary sewer master plan, I think we started about 1.2 million. And then eventually over the 5-year process, it went to 1.5 million. And again, this is for the televising contract, the various sewer lining contracts, and other projects related to sanitary sewers as identified in the original master plan.
Right. Mr. Aldrich, though, if I could add, your comments pertain to solely sewer capital projects, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Right. So the entire sewer division, though, in terms of the operating side, has a budget of $4 million for sewer operations, and then the capital side is about $1.6 million this year. So.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Mr. McCarthy?
Thanks. I'm remembering to lower my hand without getting scolded. Again, Ms. Smith and I appear to be on the same page with some of our comments, but I'll say it anyway to reiterate and make sure that we're taking the opportunity to celebrate good conservative budgeting practices by our department staff, Mr. Aldridge, Mr. Hune, and all the department heads. It's great when we can come under budget significantly and put that money right back into the capital fund so we can do more projects to keep our infrastructure up to date and keep our citizen dollars working hard for them and our city infrastructure. So thanks to staff and great job budgeting. Thank you.
And we had Mr. Preston, but I think it looks like Mr. McCarthy took the words out of his mouth.
You got it.
Further on this item, please call the roll.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The contract is awarded. Item G is a resolution approving the 3-year continuing service agreements and hourly rates and direct costs for professional engineering and architectural services for 2020 to 2023 for various town departments. Mr. Nord.
I so move.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Nord.
Thank you. From the last project we just talked about and some other recent ones, we can see the benefit of bidding work out. You know, the town has seen significant savings. My question regarding this one is if Ms. Reese could explain the process of when there's a project, we've got a list of these vendors. When they're all equally qualified, how do you choose which vendor to use? Are they on a rotating list? Or how do we handle that? Because I understand price is not the criteria.
Sure, Mr. Nord. I will invite Mr. Otto to unmute himself. He is on the call as well. And we, as I mentioned in our email exchange earlier, when we have a project, the engineering team or the affected department, so it's usually engineering department combined with public works or with water, perhaps even facilities or parks, they will take a look at our design experts through this continuing services agreement, see what expertise each department or each vendor has, and then contact them to talk about the project at hand. So I'll let Mr. Otto talk about that selection process.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. That's correct. The criteria we use when selecting one of the firms that are on our, if you will, pre-qualified list, kind of varies depending on the project. Each project comes with its own complexities and expertise that's required. Sometimes local firms are preferred if surveying is involved. Surveying is something you have to mobilize field crews and often involves going to the site multiple times, and smaller projects, survey plats, things, easements that we do, just makes sense to use them for that. Others require structural engineering. Not all firms have structural engineering. Those are typically larger firms, and we use those for a lot of our bridge projects and rely on them as well for some of the bridge inspection services that we need when we need a structural to look at some things. So we kind of tailor the engineer, knowing their capabilities, knowing the staff that's available from each of these firms, and we feel confident that the firms that are listed provide a service to the town and that they have a wide variety of capabilities, including architecture.
Sure.
Let me add to that just briefly so we're clear on that. This is for day-to-day work that they do. If there are any large project that would require more than $25,000 expenditure, that would come to us. And that the various firms would be identified as the bidder or the vendor on those projects. So this does not approve anything but what these vendors are saying their hourly rates for certain skills are.
That's kind of the question I was going to ask. Mr. Otto, would you confirm that if there's a project that's over the $25,000, and we can say a big project, let's say $1 million project where the engineering fees are going to be well over 25,000. If you've got engineers or engineering firms that are both equally qualified, Do they then bid on that project?
We are by state statute and federal. For instance, the most recent one we're in the process of procuring engineering for is West College Avenue that we discussed a couple weeks ago at the public hearings. That process is called quality-based selection. So how that works is we advertise a request for qualifications or an RFQ that's advertised statewide through our listserv as well as in the paper. And then firms are invited to submit their qualifications for that project. Once we receive all of the qualifications from interested firms, we evaluate those and select typically 3 for if it's a federal process, it's a little different that we have to go through. So for West College, we're going through the federal process because of our funding source. So we select 3 firms to interview. And from that, we select our top firm. From there, we move into contract negotiation. So it's not a straight, well, we pick you and you are our firm. We move into contract negotiations based on independent estimates that are developed internally by our staff or sometimes by other engineers as well that are independent from the firm that's being negotiated with. And then from there, we negotiate a contract that's fair and reasonable is the process.
And
Okay,
and Mr. Otto, then, sorry to interrupt, Mr. Nord, then in that particular situation, that final agreement does come back to council for approval.
So
Okay.
yes, that's correct. So for all these large projects, we typically do an independent process outside of this process. So this is for smaller projects where local projects that are already approved in the CIP that the council has already signed off on typically.
Okay, so then if I understand that correctly, the architects bid the same as what the contractors would. They just might have a different process to submit their bid.
It's not exactly a bid, just because I always liken it to going out for bids for your heart surgery. You don't necessarily take the low bid. So different firms have different expertise and different staffing that have capabilities of different than others. So those are all evaluated and looked at to make sure that we get a good fit for the project we have and we get a good value.
Okay, but as I don't know if I made it clear enough before, but if you've got contractors that all things are equal, then do they get bid out?
We can't solicit directly cost during selection. So that's especially for these federal and state jobs. So we have
for local jobs.
For local jobs, we still do not do a direct bid because not all local firms have the same capabilities. So we put it out and we follow the QBS process.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Ms. Lorenz?
Yeah, I'd like to call the question on this. I feel like we are getting way down into the weeds and not germane to our policy.
Do you have anything further, Mr. Nord?
Oh, no, it doesn't. No, I don't.
Seeing no others, please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings? Aye. Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The resolution is approved. Item H is a resolution authorizing a first addendum to the billing service agreement with Acumed Billing Incorporated, and that's for ambulance billing. Mr. Nord.
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Nord, go ahead.
Thank you. According to the packet, Ms. Reese, correct me if I'm wrong. We've been using this vendor since 2006.
That is correct.
Okay, and the contract ended July 1st, is that right? And it's been automatically renewed to 1-year terms?
Actually, that is not right. It might say that in the report. I'm not sure if you're referencing a certain date in the report. I think the contract actually expires in August, and I'm going to look for Chief Humer to jump in on that.
And then it would renew then every year after that? just on one-year renewals?
I'm not sure. Sorry, Chief. I'm not sure if the contract renews every year for infinity or if it was a certain period of time. I think it was limited to 2 or 3 one-year extensions, but I'm going to also defer to Chief Humor.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. And I thought in the proposal or the council action report that it was July 31st that it expired, but that was my recollection.
Okay.
In writing that.
So,
but it does have a renewal, a once a year renewal that perpetuates for 5 years, I think.
Okay. So then if we don't approve this tonight or make a decision tonight, this is just going to automatically renew for just 1 year.
Correct.
Okay. This vendor's been they've had the contract since 2006. That's 14 years. This apparently did not get bid out.
Correct.
You know, I don't know if this is a reasonable amount or not a reasonable amount or not a reasonable amount without having information to back it up. You know, we talk about making these data-driven decisions.
Sure.
At some point, or at what point should we start checking to see if this price is reasonable? I mean, 14 years, should we wait 19 years? Because that'll be what it'll be if we approve it.
Sure. Just a little background that might help a little bit is that you're absolutely right. 2006 is when we signed the first agreement with Acumed. That is when Lifeline Mobile Medics went out of business and we started charging for paramedic service. Prior to that, we did not bill anybody for any of the services for ambulance services. That was before we hired all the paramedics. On a joint decision, the Bloomington City Council and the Normal City Council decided to go with Acumed. And we also decided on a billing schedule that we would stick to. That's why we have the 3% increase every January that is by ordinance. And so the contract with Acumed has been renewed several times, like you said. We have had very good luck with them. The last time, I believe, was in 2017 when we renewed it. They went ahead and paid for half of the electronic software that we used to send the data to them for billing, because in the past it was paper copies that were FedExed, and you know, it took days to send in a bill to the billing company. And in this day and age of the electronic age, if you're not one of the first bills in the door, you might not get paid, because the hospitals are so good at billing right away that if someone has reached their maximum level on their insurance or something like that, you might be the last one in and you might not get paid. So you want to be the first one in. So we actually send our billing information 3 times a day electronically to them so that we can get that bill in quickly. So they went ahead and paid for half of that as a part of last year's contract, or the last contract that we had with them. This year, they have gone ahead and they're going to continue to pay for half of that, which is kind of unusual for a billing company. And they're also dropping the percentage rate from 6.5% to 6%. So currently, the town of Normal, the city of Bloomington, Carlock, and Danvers are the only agencies that I know that are using Acumed here locally. Ambulance billing is a very specialized service. Not just any medical billing company can bill or wants to bill that. I'm not aware of any medical billing companies anywhere in the Twin City area that does any kind of ambulance billing professionally. I think the closest one is probably Joliet, which is a company called Andre's billing service, and they do a lot of the suburbs ambulance services up there as well. But I know that you know, their percentage of collection is very similar, or if not exactly similar to what we have been paying in the past. And, you know, the process of ambulance billing, it's just not one time you send out a bill and in 30 days you receive the money in the mail from Medicare or public aid or a third party carrier. You know, this is an ongoing process of several letters. People are responsible for portions of that because, you know, Medicare patients are responsible for the 80% or for the 20% that Medicare doesn't pay. So you have to bill for that. They send a series of letters. We also have a relationship with a collection agency, which they send all of our files to electronically. And they also do, you know, some consulting work with us on future trends, things that we need to move forward with. For example, because of the COVID situation, Medicare is paying 2% more on every ambulance run between now and December 31st. And so, you know, it is a little complicated. It's more complicated than just your local doctor or dentist or somebody like that that's billing it, sending it one time, and they get reimbursed. There's multiple layers and levels that are involved with that. So that's why it's a kind of a specialty. And, you know, it would take us 6 or 8 months to unwind ourselves from anybody that we were in business with, just because of the time it takes to have these bills paid. You know, they also set up payment arrangements with patients and that type of thing as well. So,
Chief, if I could jump in, one additional comment. We have a very high collection rate comparatively. The recovery rate on our EMS charges is 61% of our billed charges, which we believe is a very good number. And compared to other both public sector and private sector EMS providers, of which I think Chief Humer is familiar, we think that's a pretty good number, and that we believe also is a credit to the level of service that Acumed provides. That's why we're recommending Acumed. We did not go out for proposals.
Okay, I understand that it would be nice to keep the money local, but you know, this is a specialized service, so you know, there's probably places elsewhere. I mean, our water bill is sent out to St. Louis instead of using someone local. But I would like to be able to demonstrate to our constituents, you know, every council person up here, that we did our due diligence and that we're able to show them that this contract is indeed the best value for the money that we take from them. And I'm struggling how I should respond to our constituents if they ask us to justify through data how this is a good value without having anything to compare it with in the past 14 years. That's what I struggle with. I am absolutely not questioning that this is a good company. It's just having that information to show that we did our due diligence. So for that reason, and because this goes on for a year, you know, I don't see a dire need that we need to approve this tonight. So I would like to request, or I would like to make a motion that we table this until such time as this can be bid out.
Sure, and I understand that, and we can do that, but you know, you'll be paying more money for the next year because I negotiated a 5% drop in the price.
Half percent.
Or half percent. I'm sorry, 0.5%. So instead of paying 6.5, we're going to pay, or instead of paying 6, we're going to pay 6.5, like we currently did with the last contract.
Do you think that if we table this for 2 weeks, that would happen?
We have a motion to table for 2 weeks. Is there a second?
I'll ask my question afterwards. Sorry.
Is there a second? Motion to table fails. I would say, Mr. Nord, that if you capture the audio and video that Mr. Humer and Ms. Reese just gave, the testimony that they did indeed look at this situation and compared it to other firms, the collection rates, the costs, and that. The verification is there. It doesn't need to have a bid process to verify that it's a good deal. I don't know how things work in your business, but you know, when I work with people in my business, I develop a trust with them, and I understand what I'm buying from them, and I look at what the competition is providing and what the cost of that is, and I think that's exactly what is happening here. That indeed they are doing their due diligence in that. Ms. Smith.
I fail to understand the concern about this particular line item that does represent a cut in rates and a one-year extension. I believe that there's been ample explanation provided that this is a working relationship that has served the town well, and that this is a complicated process. You have coordination of benefits that impact the billing, since you have not only Medicare but Medicaid, and we all know how slow the state of Illinois was to make payments when the budget impasse happened a few years ago. And so to question a working relationship that is profiting the town despite its longevity, I would argue that the longevity is there because it is a sound working relationship. And if we cannot trust that our staff is making reasoned choices, then I don't understand why that distrust is there. Because this is a complicated billing process. I'm aware, since I have a background in medical insurance and licensing, that there's a move towards consolidation. I doubt that there are an expanse of companies able to provide this service. And if we've succeeded in getting this company to assist with the software, if we're sending out billings 3 times a day as opposed to once a day or once a week, if they're cutting the rate despite its longevity, I think it needs to be rewarded and not questioned. Thank you.
Ms. Lorenz, and then Mr. Preston.
Yeah, I'm going to keep mine short because I'm not sure I could add anything more to what Ms. Smith said. She took the words right out of my mouth. Well said, Ms. Smith. I guess the only thing I'll add is another compliment to Chief Humer for building a relationship and negotiating an excellent price. So thank you.
Mr. Preston.
Yep, a lot of the same here. I think that Ms. Smith really hit it right on the head, that having a relationship with a organization, a vendor that does this specialized service for us, they have been fair to us for a long time, and now they are coming and agreeing to do it and actually reduce our expense. That, in my mind, is no time or way or reason to turn them away and leave them out dangling. I think that's certainly a sign of good faith on their part, and something that I would echo appreciation to the chief and to them as well for. Thanks.
And Mr. McCarthy.
I just get to say ditto. It's pretty simple for me when we're talking about lowering our rates. We're looking at the engineering rates a little bit ago. I'm pretty sure none of those were lowered in any degree of significance. It's rare when we see a vendor contract negotiated down, but a claims experience is a very hard thing to get, and a collection experience is a very hard thing to get. And so if we've got a great relationship with a above industry standard claims experience, and they're reducing our costs by paying 50% of our software costs. And in order to help us get that 61% collection rate, I'm fully supportive. Sounds like a fantastic relationship. Thanks, Chief, and your staff who are cultivating that relationship.
Thank you.
Mr. Nord.
Thank you. Just one last thing is there's a policy that we have so we don't make decisions like this. It says that we get things bid out. So what made me question this is because we have this policy and we're not bidding it out. So again, it had nothing to do with the selection of the vendor or anything like that. Just we have a policy. I struggle to understand when we use the policy versus when we don't, because the council packet does not say we are waiving this bid policy. If it had it in there, then that would be clear. So thank you.
Mr. Nord, that this has come up in the past where it sounds like we've violated our procurement policies, and we haven't in this particular instance. We haven't in the past either. So I'm not sure if there's anything that maybe we should do next time in terms of incorporating language, but as I indicated, this agreement would have renewed for another year at 6.5% per the actual adopted agreement. I just want to make it clear we didn't violate any procurement policies by bringing this recommendation to council.
And Mr. Preston.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to take my hand down.
Okay. Further on the item? Please call a roll.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
No.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye, the resolution is approved. We move to general orders, and we have 4 items for general orders. The first item is an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2019-2020 operating and capital investment budget.
Move approval.
Second.
Second. Are there questions or comments on this, please? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye, the ordinance is approved. Item 8 is a resolution approving an amended site plan for Rivian at 100 North Rivian Motorway.
Oh, move approval.
Second.
Thank you. A discussion on this item. Mr. Nord.
Thank you. Thank you. Just for the record, I wanted to clarify that the incentives that were previously granted, those have all been given, and this project going forward is something that there's been no fee waivers, reductions, or variances based off of another incentive. So this is all full boat, I guess, as one would say. Is that accurate?
That was what was in the packet, and that was communicated to you in an email. Yes.
Sure, but for public education, it's important that that gets out there.
Once it's on the record, it is public.
And if I could just add, this is just site plan approval. That's what we're asking council to do. So.
Further on this item. Please call the roll.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The resolution is approved. And Mr. Nord, could you lower your hand, please? Thank you. Item 9 is a resolution reapproving the preliminary subdivision plan for Pheasant Ridge.
So moved.
Second.
Is there discussion on this item? Mr. Nord.
Actually, no, I don't have a question for this one. It's the next one.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The resolution is approved. Item 10 is a resolution reapproving the final plat of Nussbaum's second subdivision and Nussbaum's third subdivision having to do with Nussbaum Transportation at 19336 North 1425 East Road.
Move approval.
Approval. Second.
And Mr. Nord, I think you had a question.
Yes. Is this property annexed into this town of Normal or being annexed in?
No, not anytime in the near future.
So this is county, correct?
It is located in the county, that is correct, but it is within the 1.5 mile jurisdiction of the town's corporate limits.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Smith?
Yes, and for the record, the packet included a term I had not seen previously. I think it described as extraterritorial. Is that the definition of this? That because this particular location is within 1.5 miles of our limits, it comes before the council for this vote?
Well, I'm going to say yes. And that terminology was used in the council report under the community impact. I will make sure that Ms. Davison, who authored the report, or Mr. Day can affirm. I don't know if that is the only reference we make toward that 1.5 mile boundary, but that is certainly what we used in this report.
Get a nod from Ms. Davidson. Further on the item? Please call the roll.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The resolution is approved. We have one item of new business, and that is a presentation of the economic impacts of COVID on the town's current current fiscal year position having to do with fiscal year 2020 and 2021.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Any preliminary comments, or do we go right to Mr. Nord? Or I'm sorry, Mr.
Hune. Yes. I will ask Mr. Hune to get ready. I'm sure he's unmuting and getting his presentation ready. Basically, thank you this evening, Mayor and Council, for allowing us to take some time under your new business section. And our goal is to give you an update on our fiscal position in response to how COVID is impacting our general fund. You might recall that at our May 4th City Council meeting, we gave you our original assumptions of how the pandemic may affect our general fund. And we figured now is a good time to bring you up to speed. So Mr. Hune has a relatively brief presentation, and then we'll be available to answer any questions you may have. Mr. Hune?
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here tonight and to present this information to you. My first question is, can you hear me okay? And I'm going to share my screen.
Andrew, you might want to turn up the volume just a tiny little bit. I think that would be helpful. But we can see your screen. Yes, that's good. Thank you. And we can see your screen.
Super. As Pam mentioned, we're going to do an update on where we're at with COVID. In terms of the slides presentation, we're going to talk about kind of a reminder of the relevant timeline we're talking about here. And I'll describe that in a couple of slides. We're talking about what modeling we've done for the COVID impact. We're going to talk with some detail about how the adopted budget looks to our first quarter of the fiscal year, April, May, and June, how we adjusted the COVID budget, how that looks now, and how the actions are coming against both those parameters. And then we'll discuss some of the variance issues and then next steps. So just as a kind of reminder of a timeline to kind of set the idea of what we're talking about here in terms of the space of time. And this is obviously well publicized in the news and you're all aware, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but the months we're talking about they're going to be the most impactful months for the town and its economic impact from COVID is basically, mid-March to the end of June. And why we say that essentially because we had the restaurants, essentially closed down in mid-March. We had a stay-at-home order at the end of March. That was lifted at the end of May, and moved into phase 4 at the end of June. So really that mid-March to end of June time period is the focus of where we'll see most of our economic impact. Now, we're obviously not out of it yet, and things can change in the future, and getting back 100% is questionable, but those are the significant months we're talking about, and that kind of frames a lot of our discussion for this presentation. In terms of a reminder, we did come to council on May 4th to essentially talk about our COVID-related budget adjustments or our COVID forecast for the adopted budget. To give you some review, there's almost 140 lines of revenue in the general fund alone. About 27 of those lines make up 90% of the total revenue in the general fund. We essentially adjusted 48 different lines of revenue that we thought would be impacted by COVID. And this ranged from our largest revenue source, which is local sales tax, down to annual revenue from golf lessons. So we did a pretty deep dive on the revenue to see what might be impacted. And we adjusted each of those revenues for the entire fiscal year as a forecast. That in the end resulted in a $10.4 million impact estimated for our total revenue for the entire fiscal year would be down by that against our estimate and our forecast. And you can see there, the 7 revenues there, or the 6 revenues there, local sales tax, state income, food and beverage, hotel, motel, motor fuel tax. Those are kind of the big 6 of those 48 that we looked at, and they make up $7.8 million of the 10.4 in terms of how we adjusted those down for this fiscal year. To give you some background on the modeling we did, this slide shows that top box essentially shows our estimate. Yellow represents what we thought would be the general stay-at-home or impactful months of the COVID pandemic. We figured March to about the end of July. Actually, what's occurred is kind of March to the end of June. So we're a little better off there. You can see that we essentially took our expected income or revenue for each of those line items by month and brought it down as a percent of budget. So under a normal year, we'd expect 100% of the normal year, 100% of the budget coming in. For local sales tax, we thought for March it'd be 87%, for April 62%, for May 54%, and so forth. And you can see how we kind of work through all those numbers. We never actually get to 100%, and I'll discuss this later on in a few more slides about the V look of this and what we think might come out of it. The second box below there says the actuals. That's what we've actually seen. So by way of comparison, for March, we expected 87% of 100% regular year of revenue because of COVID. 80% came in March. For stage sale, 88% came in against 87% estimate. So we were pretty close there. You can see April, you can see it with yourself, April is 69 versus 62. So we're fairly in line or a little better off right now in our major revenue for the most part, although we haven't experienced all the months yet for our June close. You can see an interesting in state income tax, 107% came in March. We're expecting something less than that, obviously. What happened there is really most of the unemployment that occurred kind of in late March, and likely people kind of got, for the most part, 2 full paychecks in March. So we probably kind of jumped the gun a bit in March for income tax, but again, we're being conservative. You can see in April, we had a significant drop in income tax, what we expected. It came in at 51% of what we expect for a full year. We estimated 62, so we knew it would drop down. It dropped down a bit lower than we thought, and then back up again in May and June. And I will report for the April 51%, that's kind of a unique number. What caused a lot of that is the state and the Fed pushing off the date for income tax being due. Typically, April is a big month for income tax for most municipalities because you get the regular income tax from the payroll costs and the corporations for their income tax, and you get people paying their tax bill for April 15th. In this case, we didn't get that. We'll get that sometime in July because, as you know, the feds and the state moved the date of deadline for taxes April 15th to July 15th. So that is kind of a unique number. It's come back fairly strong in May and June. I can speculate why that's happening, but for the most part, we're nice. It's good to see compared to our estimate. And it's also helping us, in terms of our overall cash flow for the first quarter. Food and beverage was what we expected, a little better than we expected. And then of course you can see the number for yourself. So we're tracking this very closely against our expectation. And generally speaking, we're either at or above our expectation in terms of revenue, which is a good thing for the first quarter at least, and for the known months. This is a reminder to kind of give the council a reminder on when it's actually earned and collected. So when I talk about the March to June timeframe being the most impactful months from the pandemic to date, we haven't actually seen all the activity hit our books yet for that. So by way of example, for April, May, and June, we've closed the books for the first quarter, and the numbers we have as of revenue are for sales tax are just through March earned. So we just basically have a little bit of a feel in our actual books right now how that looks. And then we'll know more in July, August, and September as we start bringing those receipts in from those more active months. For other revenue sources like income tax, food and beverage, automotive, we know a little bit more because the delay is not quite as significant. For sales tax and local tax, sales tax, it's a 3-month delay from the actual time it's earned. Income tax is about a month behind. Automotive about a month behind, and so forth. So we have a little more information as we proceed, but not a whole lot through this first quarter. In terms of this chart, kind of shows year-to-date actuals for our first quarter of the fiscal year, April, May, and June. You can see the kind of the cumulative effect of the revenue. The blue line is the adopted budget, our expectation there. The purple line is our COVID forecast. Obviously we took revenue way down from our adopted budget, so that line is below the blue line. And the red line is the actual revenue to date through this first quarter. Tracking fairly close to April and May for the most part, and then we actually had a boost up in revenue for June. That is entirely a result of a timing issue. When we forecasted our COVID budget or our COVID forecast, we were hearing a lot about pushing out property tax, giving benefits to taxpayers. We weren't sure what was going to happen with that. And then we did this back in March. So we pushed off the collection of property tax 30 days in our COVID forecast. Actually, what the county ultimately did was about a 2-week delay, and that did not have a significant impact on the timing for the most part. So we pushed out the revenue in the COVID budget, and it came in a little earlier in actuals. So that's why you see that bump up there between the red and the purple line. There also was some savings or more revenue than expected from the park programs. This is basically they opened up a little faster in terms of stuff. Other stuff in most also local motor fuel tax, food and beverage, hotel, motel, all came in a little better than what we expected them to come in. So that's part of that too. In terms of unfavorable revenue, you saw the income tax there. It came in about 50% of what we expected in April. That had an impact, an unfavorable impact on our estimate. And the waste collection fee also is a bit down. And that's also entirely a function of the delay in the fee increase that the council instituted.
So Andrew, if I could jump in, that $300,000 amount that's unfavorable, that's the key components of that 300,000 are both income tax and the delayed waste collection revenue. So waste fee revenue. So it's combined.
Correct. Exactly. And there's multiple other revenues that I didn't go into detail on that make up a lot more different. Those are the main components, and those are the most significant ones combined. You're correct. In terms of information that you've already seen, we want to kind of remind you again, when we first entered this issue with COVID and the economic shutdown, prior to our May 4th recommendation, the May 4th recommendations is we made some immediate adjustments to the budget. We chose to not transfer any money to Vehicle and Equipment Reserve Fund from the general fund. We all remember Rivian foregoing their payment from us as good partners in the process, and that saved us $1 million. We also cut back on transfers from general fund to the capital improvement fund, $545,000. We do have some contingency money in the budget that we're going to be very wary of using because we're going to need that in terms of that cash flow. And we also essentially cut in half the transfer to the railway fund. These were kind of quick reaction things that we can certainly manage in our 5-year budget. but it did create a positive financial impact to the general fund of about $4.2 million right away. And that helps offset immediately our estimated $10.4 million drop in revenue. In terms of since then, kind of the commentary, what has been the additional expenditure savings for the first quarter of the fiscal year, April, May, and June. And as we close June, we have seen some pretty good savings in salary and benefits. Almost $700,000 of that is part-time and seasonal payroll expense cuts related to COVID. These are what you'd expect: the pool, cultural arts, the CDM, the theater, a lot of the recreational programming that didn't occur. So when those services aren't occurring or happening, then we haven't got to staff them, and we save that cost there. Also, there's always some vacancy savings in our budget. We're experiencing some of that right now for the first quarter. In our full-time staff, we always budget, in terms of our budget plan, 100% full employment for the town. But obviously, there's always going to be vacancy savings if people turn over, retirements and so forth. So we're experiencing some of that too. We have significantly lower overtime compared to previous years. And of course, no employee activities have all been cut in reaction to COVID and so forth. Other savings too, purchase services. We have about a little $500,000 there. That's travel and training savings, where departments are kind of holding off on training when they can. Advertising costs, postage, printing, and other. A lot of that stuff relates directly to some of the park programs, recreational programs. Also the supply costs, same kind of mantra there. There's supply costs that we avoided by not having those programs in place. Now that will obviously return in the future, but for this year, it is a pure savings. And then some hold off on property and equipment maintenance to the extent possible. There was a slight offset in terms of savings, $800,000 or so of additional costs that was in the other direction. But that also has to do with, is offset by the property tax. And to kind of explain this, we budgeted for property tax as part of our COVID budget to come in 30 days later. It came in pretty much the same as it always does. And then I also pushed off the property tax payment we make to the pension fund. So as property tax comes into the general fund, we collect it as revenue, and we take a portion of the property tax that is rated for police and fire and give it to the pension funds. It's transfer out of the general fund. That transfer occurred ahead of time also, just as the revenue occurred. So it's kind of a wash. So that won't be repeated in the future, but that's essentially the overrun in terms of expense. Everything else was entirely under budget. This slide just kind of does some year-to-year analysis. We do a lot of budget to actual analysis and budget estimates to COVID estimates. We also look at year-to-year stuff pretty closely. And I just cut apart of the most significant cultural arts and parks and recreation. You can see the blue shows the first quarter spending of part-time costs last year. Again, not a COVID year, a regular year of activity, pools opening, and before school care and CDM, the museum, all the park programs, recreational programs ongoing. This year, big difference in terms of that performance and those services or those programs. And you can see it translates into the part-time service costs or part-time salary costs for the first quarter of the fiscal year. This is basically the same slide information. It shows, the blue shows last year's spending for the first quarter, red shows the current year spending. This is by department in the general fund. You can see they're all down. The far right there, you can see PR, that's Parks and Rec, they're the most significant difference. A lot of also savings across all departments, particularly police and fire, public works, all experiencing some savings, either through vacancy savings, overtime savings, or certainly the park and rec programs that were eliminated during those months. In terms of expense, the same kind of line of thinking in terms of the slide display. We're seeing about $1.9 million in expenses. We've already kind of discussed most of those in the slide before. You can see the blue line was adopted budget. We brought down the purple line with our COVID budget, and then you can see our actual experience in terms of expenses is actually below both, which is a good place to be. That was pretty much to be expected because when we developed the COVID budget line, we didn't really play with expenses too much because we weren't sure what was going to happen in terms of that activity. We mostly hit revenue. And then as the months wore on, we knew more, we reacted more, we could deal with more expense ideas. So we are seeing some significant savings in expense compared to the COVID budget and the adopted budget, obviously. This is kind of a chart that shows the actual fund balance. When you take revenue expense against our current cash coming into the fiscal year, so you can see same methodology. The blue line, it was the adopted budget, what we expected. We expected a $35,000 surplus planned for this fiscal year. The purple line shows what we expected with our COVID estimate, our COVID forecast, or our COVID budget, about a $6.2 million deficit. And that's in essence the $10.4 million drop in revenue against the 4.2 or so savings from our initial transfer reductions and the ribbon payment and so forth. And then of course the red line shows where we're at. We're actually above budget right now. That's basically because we have not really experienced the full impact of the revenue yet from COVID. So we'll see that line start to bend down. We're getting automatic savings right now from not transferring the funds to the vehicle reserve, CIP, and roadway fund. We're experiencing some good savings due to park recreational programs being closed for a couple months. So we're in a pretty good position right now for the first quarter. We're not necessarily going to change our forecast. We're going to reconcile against it, and we'll know more probably in late September, early October, because by then we'll have that period of time, that mid-March to end of June, we'll have all the revenue on our books by then that are impactful months from COVID, or at least the most significantly impacted, assuming nothing happens going forward in terms of another shutdown or some kind of economic pullback, which is always possible. So right now we are in fairly good condition. I don't mean to leave you with all kinds of optimism. We're happy to be where we're at, but we are still going to be very careful. And I would caution any real excitement over this until we get past September into October. And by then we'll be well into budget season and be dealing with these things on a daily basis at this point. I do have quite a few conversations with a lot of different folks, our banking sector contacts, our investment people, our financial advisors, different market folks, and they all have a lot of good information to share. I was recently on a meeting with Commerce Bank, and they do a night, I'm with them monthly to go over certain investment things the town carries, and they share their economic expertise. And I just want to show you a few of their slides. With their permission, of course, they're happy to provide this information for me to use and to share with you all. And I won't go into a lot of detail, but just a few takeaways from their slides. This slide is very impactful because it gives us a sense of how deep the dive was for the economy when this all first hit, and then to the general expectation for the out years, out quarters, out periods. And this is pretty close, kind of we were estimating back in May. You can see a deep dive. That dotted red line is basically returning to pre-COVID economic activity. And at this time, there's a broad recognition that we're looking at probably the end of the mid-quarter 22, third quarter calendar year 22, before we actually get back to even where we're at before COVID hit. So that has certainly, a very telling thing for us in terms of our budget process this year. And we were kind of expecting something to this effect anyway, but it does help kind of validate that and give us a sense of process going forward. This is another neat slide. It talks a lot about, kind of gives you a perspective of all the recessions, the Great Depression, obviously in 1930, where it was a significant drawback of the GDP. It was many, many years of depression. And then each dot there, each plot there, and this gives you a sense of what was going on with certain events in our history of economics. You can see the very last one under 2010, the fiscal crisis. That was, of course, the housing crisis, the housing bubble, and it started in kind of 08. And then you can see now that last one, the current recession that we're in, 12.8% decline in GDP. That's the result of the pandemic and COVID. So obviously significant historical watermark in terms of economic issue, but closest it probably can be back to the post World War II decline of 12.7%. So again, this historically gives you a sense of where we're at, some perspective on this, on the extent of it. This also, just two more charts to show you. This second last one, you see a trend line. This essentially shows e-commerce as a percent of total retail commerce. It's been growing, as we all know, from online retailers for the last decade. We saw commerce's data is indicating a significant spike up. from COVID. That's obviously what we've seen in terms of the use of online versus brick and mortar, and that's going to be impactful going forward too. And then this final slide here just gives you again some perspective on official unemployment rates, since the early 70s. And Commerce had a very interesting comment about this that again is telling for our future in terms of how we manage this in the budget process for this remaining fiscal year, next year, and the out years. Is you see a huge spike of unemployment in April to 14.7, then 13.3 in May, and then 11.1 in June. And how they kind of described this to their audience was the market and the folks that study this very closely are essentially saying, we had a huge spike of unemployment because a lot of people that work directly with the customer were released from employment. Bartenders, waiters, hotel staff, these are direct people working with the customer directly. They have, for the most part, been hired back, and we've seen a drop in the unemployment rate. But what they're seeing now is some hesitancy in some of the back office hiring, some of the middle management positions, to where Commerce Bank kind of described it as kind of a structural unemployment issue for a while that could span for a couple of years as companies get more comfortable with the idea of returning revenues to 100% to pre-COVID levels. So again, unemployment's dropping because we're bringing those direct customer salespeople back into the industries, but they're holding off on other positions that are not necessarily front forward facing and trying to retool their own business models to deal with the lower than expected revenues that might continue for some time. So those slides are kind of a good segue into this final slide, and certainly any questions that you might have. We're certainly watching the numbers very closely. Hopefully this information is pretty high level. We're pretty deep in it here in finance and with the city manager's office, watching this pretty closely. It's almost an obsession at this point in time in terms of looking at the numbers, which it always has been kind of anyways. But we will know a lot more by September close. Obviously, we'll learn more every single month. By the time we get through September close, mid-October, we'll have a pretty good feel for those initial months where we had essentially an impactful economy problem from COVID pandemic, mid-March to end of June. But again, we never scale up to 100% for the entire fiscal year back to regular revenues, and that might not occur for a 1 or 2 year period after that. We will come back to council sometime in the future, probably likely in September, when we talk about the audit report, the trend report, and kind of a preamble to the budget discussion. That's when we'll have more information, not perfect data, but we'll at least have an August close number to look at and have a lot more data on what's going on with the pandemic and the economic impact for our town. And the budget process is going to be very interesting this year. We're going to have to talk about how to plan to recover from reserves. We're going to have to talk about what other possible cuts we might want to take in terms of this fiscal year and next fiscal year to help that recovery either quicken and get used to a new normal reality in terms of the economy as it emerges. Because what I'm hearing and reading, I'm sure what you all are seeing and hearing and reading too, is that there's going to be some real hesitancy in terms of the expectation of a full economy for some time, whether it's a healthcare person talking about the vaccine and the market, or businesses, restaurants, hotels. They're all going to be impacted for a while. They are coming back now, but the 100% mark could be, like I said, the second quarter 22, according to Commerce and a lot of powers that be. So that's a lot of data, a lot of information that kind of concludes my comments. But I'm happy to try to address any questions that you might have on the information that was discussed.
The one thing I will jump in and say before council starts asking questions is this is just a snapshot in time. This is what we know today, and still we are maintaining our original assumptions. While Andrew indicated that the view today looks pretty good, there's still so many things we don't know regarding the long term, so we're not in a position where we're going to recommend any modifications to our assumptions. And so the months of August and September are when staff starts putting together our budget proposals for fiscal year 21-22. So all of the staff will be deeply involved in our budget review and putting numbers together for the next couple of months, actually. And then we feel like by the time September and October get here, certainly we'll have a pretty good, a very good picture to share with you. I also want to just remind council that September is a big financial month for us. That is the month when we come to you with the CAFR and the audit review, as well as our financial trends report. So lots on the horizon for you to be reviewing soon. And I'll open it up for questions.
Thanks, Pam. Thanks, Andrew. You're a genius in the first 3 months here, so you've done a great job. But I share with you, we've got to be conservative going forward and watch things and kind of stepping away from the numbers. I think I'm just going to make the comment now, and I'll probably make it multiple times for the general public in our community, Bloomington, Normal, McLean County. We've got a lot of discipline that we have to maintain in terms of going forward, in terms of social distancing and wearing a mask into the stores and things like that. Because talking through our COVID task force, small businesses, restaurants, hotels, and that, if there's another shutdown, a lot of them will be gone. They'll just be gone. So it's imperative that we as a council and keep the message very strong moving forward that we're not out of the woods on this yet. And so we have to show some personal discipline in terms of protecting ourselves and our family and our friends and other people in the community from getting a spike in this in September. I would direct you to the dashboard that Basu and her people have put together on the town website that has up-to-date data on what's happening in McLean County and the world. And Basu, I don't know if it's up yet or not, but there's an interesting one that came, a little dashboard item that came from Georgia Tech that has a little slide scale on it that says, you know, if you get together with 10 people in your county, here's what the chances of a spike are. And as you slide up, you know, 50 people, 75 people, and that it just astronomically goes off the charts. So I'm just reminding people again, we've got a lot of work and a lot of personal discipline to do going forward to keep this on track. And so, Mr. McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. I won't go deep into COVID forecasting, but I'm going to agree with the mayor. The bit I interface with our medical community here locally is they continue to be very concerned about our fall and winter season ahead. And anything we can do as individual council members, individual citizens to keep our levels low. We've seen some rises of late. Hopefully that plateaus back off and we can keep our businesses running. I guess I want to start off by saying great work, Andrew. I agree. You're the hero of this report. Great work. Conservative budgeting. I mean, that's straight up what you guys did. Thank you. You poured significant time and sweat in modeling and information and data collecting on how to actually model for this thing that we've never experienced before. And clearly it's paying off so far. And I hope it continues. So I'm going to echo and urge that please do continue to use these assumptions and these very conservative expectations because there's really so much unknown yet. You've said it, but not even through just the next couple of months, but with what's going to happen with the disease and potential impacts to our business and our revenue stream. So please do. At a high level, I'm just going to kind of come back, and if I've missed anything or materially misunderstand something, Andrew or Mr. Reese, please let me know. But so what I'm hearing at a high level is that our from our original budget, our revenue is down, lower collections from the various revenue sources that we typically collect from, and delayed fee implementation. So far, so good. That's what I heard.
Correct.
And also, as a result of some emergency short-term cuts to staff, programming, services, supplies, and also Rivian for giving their $1 million that they were due. That our expenses has also been lower, and so far so good. Good.
Correct.
That although our general fund balance looks good at the moment, so much is yet to be known in our some of our hardest hit revenue months and on into the future, and that we haven't fully experienced the impact of those revenue hits yet. And so that staying on this path and preserving that capital as we go forward and fully experience the hits to revenue, the ongoing hits to revenue. So hopefully at the end of the day, we don't end up as negative as we were fearful we would be. Is that what I understand?
Yes, that would be a correct characterization.
All right. I might have another question or two, but I'll leave it right there for now.
Ms. Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, this is one of those times that you're not sure what you're going to hear from the report. While it's not the greatest response that we would want to hear completely, you know, because we have seen a drop in revenue and the budget impacts, it's still better than what we expected. And we have to embrace that and be glad for your work and your efforts, Mr. Hume, to be able to help us navigate through this. One thing, just, you know, for a reminder for some of us, whether or not the possibility of what the marijuana revenue would have been has not been included, correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
That was not that wasn't part of our budget, adopted budget. And we'll start looking at probably in October from a July start date for the 3%. And that wasn't factored into the COVID budget either. So that'll be a plus no matter how you look at it in terms of when that comes in.
So there's also not some opportunity there. And I know, you know, only time will tell. We hope that we can continue to be responsible citizens to keep us from not having to revert back to some of the drastic measures that we've seen in the past, so that we can continue down a path of recovery for our community, so that we don't have to look at other deeper cuts, but to continue to find places where we can, I guess, access more revenue to make up for some of what we have lost. Once again, thank you to everyone, and especially to you, Mr. Hume.
Thank you. And Mr. McCarthy and Ms. Cummings, would you lower your hands, please? Thank you. Ms. Smith.
Yes, and just to put into some numbers, the summation that Councilmember McCarthy was noting, that your adjusted budget, factoring in the COVID, started with the need to recognize the potential for a $10 million shortfall. And our original expectation with some of the immediate actions of 4.2 in transfers and other programs that were recognized right away brought that down to just under a $6 million need. And now we're seeing some expenditure savings and some revenue better than we had anticipated, to the point where we're looking at a $4 million shortfall from this date forward. Are those numbers correct?
Yeah, that's accurate. That would be, I guess that could be in essence an updated forecast for the year. But we don't want to go too far down that road, because we haven't experienced the revenue impacts entirely, and the expense savings that we have enjoyed for this first quarter are not going to continue. But no, you're 100% correct in those numbers and in that information.
And one of the things I'm wanting to make sure I'm clear on is when you mentioned the lag time between when revenues are earned and when we see those receipts. So the fact that our fiscal year starts on April 1, if when we get March receipts in, does that go into this fiscal year or is it recognized in the prior fiscal year?
Well, it comes as cash to this fiscal year. And then when we close the books on our financials, we accrue that back to the old year. So it becomes kind of an interesting navigation. The forecast I'm showing you is essentially a cash fund balance.
Okay.
But yes, the actual March one we got in is actually booked back in the old year for the cap for our financial statements.
So, but we're focused on cash activity because it is critical for us to be able to process cash and be able to make payments.
Correct.
And the largest expenditure savings, as I'm looking at your charts, is coming from Parks and Rec and Cultural Arts because of not being able to have staff on hand that we typically would to deliver those services. And we know that residents have reached out to us upset and frustrated that the pools haven't opened and some other things. But we are booking those savings, and we're having the added bonus that this year was when we were anticipating that expense increasing because of the minimum wage going up. So we had a double boost by not having those services, although we want to continue to return to delivering that quality of life to our residents as soon as we can.
That is true. I agree with that statement, Karen. I just want to mention that when we talk about the impact or the savings in regard to Parks and Recreation and Cultural Arts, it's because those two departments have the greatest quantity of part-time and seasonal staff. So that's why when we look at our part-time salary line items, those are the departments that are most impacted when we don't hire our seasonal people for a full quarter of the year, really.
And I want to build on Mr. McCarthy's comments about and Mayor Koos's comments about holding steady on our commitment to following good health practices, the social distancing, the avoiding crowds, the wearing masks. Goldman Sachs, a Wall Street firm, completed a study that estimated that if everyone wore masks, it would be the equivalent of a 5-point boost to our gross domestic product. And that CDC had information on a study where 2 hairdressers in Missouri tested positive. They were doing clients in their salon. No one got infected because they were wearing masks and their customers were wearing masks. So they are proving effective. My family was out to dinner this past Sunday, and despite what we might recommend to people, individuals are making choices on their own. And this restaurant indicated that they have seen a drop in their revenues and their suspicion was that customers are staying away when they see the spike in cases. So if everyone does their part, it can go a long way towards getting us back to normal. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Preston.
Thanks, Mayor. 2 things. One, it is not lost on me when this all began how daunting of a task it probably was for finance to look at the early signs of the pandemic shutdown and try to put together those projections that were originally discussed back in May. An educated guess, but I'm sure probably more of a guess on the educated part, than anybody would have liked. And in light of that, seeing where we're at so far throughout this, I think it speaks volumes to Andrew and his team and to staff for putting together numbers that really were, in my mind, right where we'd want to be for our projections thus far, that we are not so far off across the board that it doesn't make sense, but that those numbers were conservative, and by and large, we are outperforming them in terms of revenue compared to what we had talked about then and started planning for. So thanks to Andrew and staff for that. And then my second thing is in follow up to a point that Ms. Smith just made, and that is regarding masks. You know, there are some people in our community and around the country who look at masks differently and for whatever reason decide that they don't want to wear them, or they don't think it's important enough or meaningful enough to wear them, or could have as much of an impact. I would just suggest to anybody who may fit that mindset, even if you don't think that it's worth doing from a health standpoint, do it for our small businesses, because as was alluded, we cannot afford to shut down again. Our economy cannot afford to shut down. And of course, I think that the health reason and motivation for wearing a mask is more than enough. But for any individual out there who may not, do it for our business owners, do it for the people who are working there and the people who are wanting to still shop there. And once things finally clear up post-pandemic, want those businesses to still be there. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Preston. And just kind of riff off of what you just said, you know, given the work that our staff has done in our finance department, just another reason why we carry a AAA bond rating. They're the best. Mr. Nord.
Thank you. During our 2-on-1, Andrew, I told you how impressed I was with the forecast. So, you know, very impressive. Thank you. A couple of questions. The purpose of the funds that we've transferred money from was to, in large part, to help fund large purchases that we can schedule. So does the forecast that you're looking at or that you're working on, does it include the replenishment of those funds?
The forecast for this current year doesn't. As part of the budget process this year, we'll look at next year and the next 5 years, and then in that we will rebalance those funds and make necessary recommendations to bring them back into balance. They're all in. Well, the vehicle reserve fund is in pretty good financial shape currently. Year 5 is down to our target. So right now, year 5 is a little below our target because we're not going to fund it by $1.8 million this year. But we're confident we can fix that in the out years during the budget process this year. And capital will be in the same situation.
Okay, and you had mentioned that the bank had said they were not expecting a recovery until Q2 of next year. Are you including that in the future budget too, that those revenues will probably be reduced?
Yeah, we're going to have to, certainly. And we've already talked about it at length with the city manager's office about how that might look. We're now projecting going back to 100% in this fiscal year. And then the question will be the wisdom we'll need to gain between now and the budget process, and during the budget process, what we think we need to do with those revenues in the out years. But it will be a process that will work through that process in terms of managing the revenue projections. But we're aware of it. We're thinking first quarter, second quarter 22 is probably reasonable at this point, given what we know, and we'll keep watching it. But it will be an impact over the budget for the out years.
Okay. That's also, if I could jump in, that's also where when we come back to council in the fall with more detailed discussions, and certainly when we talk with council about our budget proposals for fiscal year 21-22, part of those conversations will be where we're at with our projected fund balances and where do we want to be in terms of our financial targets, because we know the things that we might be delaying this year, such as capital projects, capital investments, will have to be picked up down the road. So we'll figure out a solution to that.
Sure, it's just hard to. Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
Well, I'll just add that we've been in a place like this before, not quite as bad with the housing recession, and we did build a budget in the out years that would help us recover in terms of revenue and expense. So we'll basically be using that playbook again to manage this one.
Sure, yeah, because we have no idea if this is going to happen again next year. So replenishing those funds gives us a cushion for the unknown. Another question, the property and maintenance budget, you had mentioned, or I guess there's a $230,000 transfer or savings from that. Is that savings because we're not using those facilities, those pieces of equipment, or is that deferred maintenance?
The answer is I'm not 100% sure. We have some savings that will be real, and others just kind of are being delayed. So that's why I'm hesitant to say this is a real savings from the out year for the entire year. You know, we asked department heads to be very cognizant of what they're spending and when they need to spend it. So we will see as we progress forward if we're going to have to pick those expenses up later on, or if we can go without. A lot of it is down to a very simple balance or a very simple example. You know, you have, let's say you have a lawnmower, and you're not going to change the oil this year because that costs you too much money, but that can be delayed indefinitely, or it might shorten the life of the asset and so forth. So there's a lot of balancing going on right now in terms of that property and equipment maintenance to make sure that we're being fair and responsible, but not incurring expense if we can avoid it for a while, if for the entire fiscal year, or just delay it. So that's kind of an ongoing discussion right now with our department heads, what they need to delay, what they can avoid, and what they'll need to actually pick up once we see numbers improve or not.
And I would jump in on that. In each particular instance, the leadership team has looked at those particular line items, and then we do an assessment. If we delay repairs or investment to particular property or do some sort of maintenance procedure, what is the impact, and how does that impact our potential expense down the road? Does it grow it? Does it make more sense to go ahead and spend it and make that investment now to make that repair or perform that maintenance? Or if we delay it at this point, we've only delayed it a quarter of the year. So the question is, you know, do we delay it another quarter, another 6 months, or even till next fiscal year? So that's where department heads are being very cautious about how much money they're spending right now, but also balancing that with, okay, if we don't perform this particular maintenance, or we don't provide this maybe preventive maintenance measure, then what happens down the road? So we're trying to balance that.
Okay, just my standpoint, I'm a big advocate of maintenance. Maintenance is one of the things that does not get much recognition, but it is something that absolutely is critical, because if you don't maintain, say your car and do oil changes, you know, oil changes are not that expensive, but if you don't, you will quickly be buying a new engine. Or, you know, you don't repair a part of the building and your roof starts leaking, and then now you've got all kinds of other expenses. So I would just, I don't need to know the details. I just want to put out there, my position is, if it's maintenance, I would prefer that not be deferred, because we might be looking at even higher expenses if something comes up. So I'll leave it to your guys' judgment. Just wanted to put that position out there, that maintenance will always be something that I will support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you call me, Mayor?
Yeah, you had your hand up.
Yeah. Just a follow-up I neglected to say is to any residents that are watching that have been impacted by some of our cuts. I just wanted to say sorry. We know that you've come to rely on things like the Children's Discovery Museum, our Parks and Recs, camps and pools, and various leagues that are not going on this summer as a result of those cuts. And those impacts to you and your family and your children, that is not unnoticed here at the town, and we hear you, but staff is doing as best they can to make sure that, as you can see if you're watching, that we keep ourselves in as good financial shape as we can to be able to come back stronger and bring those programs back. So thanks, Mayor.
And Ms. Lorenz.
Yes, thank you. You know, I've been listening to everybody's comments here and want to add something maybe a bit unique or underscored at least, and that is a public praise of gratitude to City Manager Reese and to her department heads. It's clear to me, particularly on the expense side of things, that you all have come together as a team and have already made and will continue to make very thoughtful decisions. And I think it's a demonstration of your professionalism and your expertise. And I don't want any of that to be lost in tonight's conversation. Obviously, what the finance team has put together is amazing. And, I think part of the recognition needs to be all those other people whose names are on my screen here who have answered the call and are doing what's right for our community and our taxpayers. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before taking a motion for adjournment, are there concerns or comments? Ms. Lorenz?
Okay, thank you. Let me lower my hand. Yeah, thanks for letting me kick off. I have a little bit of I'm going to take about 5 or 7 minutes of everybody's time, and I know it's getting late, but I have developed quite a concern over the last 15 months that's kind of come together in my mind, and I want to share it. It's a concern for our council. And I would like to take these next several minutes to speak to my council peers specifically. And I want to share concerns about some of our behavior. And I want to finish up with some challenges to all of us, a challenge for how we could perhaps behave better. None of this is meant to be a judgment on person or character. It's really meant to be about observations of behaviors. And I don't want you to take offense, Mr. Nord, but I'm going to start with you. Got to start somewhere, right? And a lot of it is because, Mr. Nord, I think you bring a set of behaviors to us that haven't really been experienced before. And it's put in motion some dynamics that have affected all of our behaviors, right? So what I want to say on that as an observation for your behaviors over the last 15 months that is on my heart to share, and that is that your words matter and your tone matters. And when you ask questions, the words you choose and the underlying tone that you bring to your questions, particularly those, not only those here at tonight's meeting and nights like this, but especially in your email too, where there can be more, subjectivity to what is the real tone. But I observe that in these questions, many of your questions, there is a basic mistrust of the staff and the staff that makes up our local government. And, your questions and all questions are good, right? I'm not saying the questions are not good. I would never want that to be discouraged. But what I have observed is that a lot of your questions come with a us versus them mentality. And that's concerning to me. It breeds a sense of mistrust. Mistrust in government, mistrust in all of us, and mistrust in the staff. And I'll get into some examples in a minute, but I want to kind of pause on that word mistrust or trust, actually, the positive side of that. I believe, and I think there's a pretty decent amount of literature out there that talks about how trust is an important ingredient to any team or any work group. Put it another way, I guess the lack of trust can tear down a team, right? Think about a team, sports or otherwise, professional setting. And if there's not a lot of trust in those players or those members, that's probably not a very high performing team. In an athletic sense, you're probably seeing more losses than wins. or at least losses that they should have won. That's the damage that mistrust can do to a team. And maybe we need to remind ourselves, we are all on the same team, okay? We all have the word normal in our role, in our title somewhere. Normal city manager, normal town council person, normal police chief, normal water, okay? We're all on the same team. And I just want that to sink in a minute. We don't have to like each other. We don't have to hang out. But we do need to treat each other with a level of respect. We should challenge each other to do better. You know, challenge each other hard. That's good. That's productive, but with a level of respect. You know, tearing us down, just tearing one person down, tears all of us down because people see that happen, and it ultimately tears a whole team down. The examples, okay, you might be wondering, okay, what am I talking about? A lot of times, Mr. Nord, your behavior and your questions that you bring begin with things like, is there not a policy? Or are we not following a policy? And, you know, words matter because kind of put it that way, it kind of puts a cast of doubt that we know what we're doing, that the staff knows what they're doing. It reminds me of my husband's grandfather that used to say all the time, no salt in this house. That was basically his way of saying this food is bland. It's not good. You know, words matter. And I really think that we need to think about the words that we use and the tone that we use. You're very detail oriented, okay? You're probably one of the only ones that really dives down deep into a lot of line item issues. That's noble, you know? One could say that it may be beyond the scope of the job description of a policymaker, but you know, detail orientation can be good. It comes across as, again, doubting the abilities of our staff department leaders. Repeatedly, you've asked in recent weeks and months about the normal theater budget, wanting to know what the budget is. Implied in there seems to be, based on the words, based on the tone, to me, that perhaps you don't trust the ability of the department head. In this case, it's Ms. Wisman. And when somebody feels that they're not being valued, when somebody feels that their work is not appreciated or deemed to be accurate, that can be very demoralizing. Now, I happen to know that Ms. Wisman is an extremely talented person. I hope she doesn't mind me picking on her if she's here tonight. I don't know, but she's an extraordinarily gifted communicator. And I happen to know that she's got a tremendous history of developing funds and managing funds in very tight budget situations. Now, I know that, so I trust her. I don't know all the department heads in the same way, but I'm going to trust that they have a level of acumen and expertise in their areas. Otherwise, they wouldn't stick around as long as they do. So those are some of the examples of where words matter and tone matters that I think is really starting to, has started really, it's not starting, it's there. This level of, and this feeling of us versus them, and them should not be trusted because them are somehow inferior or bad or not up to par. Now, I promised that I would talk to all of my peers, so I want to move on to the rest of us. Again, observations. So we have this line of questioning that's kind of filtered into our council discussions and into our emails. And what do the rest of us do? Okay. We vacillate, I think, between some form of fight and flight. And I know I'm in both of them, sometimes at the same time. It's pretty exhausting. we hear this line of questioning, and we feel this sense of mistrust. And some of us just want to like put our head down and think, I'm just going to wait for it to get over. Let's get back to productive talk. And so we just sit idly by and we don't say anything. Others, at times, will go in for the fight and refute the mistrust and refute some of the accusations that come as a result. We want to stand strong for what we know is right. And then probably most of us are back and forth in both of these camps, sometimes even within the same meeting, and it is exhausting, right? It takes away from the productivity, certainly, and the quality of our discussions. So those are my observations. Maybe you've had them. And I guess I'm only sorry that it's taken me 15 months to try to put them into words. But I think we need to change, and I think we can do better. And I want to offer 4 challenges for us. Again, to my council peers. I want us to hold ourselves to a standard of trust. And trust isn't built overnight. It's not going to be here by 2 weeks from now. But I want us to hold ourselves beginning today to a level of trust. Trust of each other and trust of everybody on our team. Secondly, I want us to work to find common ground. I want us to work for 7-0 votes. Now you say, why 7-0? Well, because that shows that we can find common ground. Sometimes they're easy. We have several 7-0 votes tonight, right? Sometimes they're really hard on more difficult issues. Sometimes they're impossible. But let's always go for finding common ground and getting as close as possible to that agreement. I think that alone will help foster the trust. Third thing, let's not just vote in dissension for the sake of dissension. Let's not put first and third Mondays as opposite day, just for the sake of being opposite. Nobody gains from that. It's silly. And let's not do, unless otherwise required by financial interest or legal reasons, let's not do abstention votes. That's weak, in my opinion. That's my opinion. That's somebody not taking the opportunity that's given to all of us as elected officials to cast a vote. And sometimes, and a lot of times, we have to vote between ugly and uglier, bad and awful. There is no easy answer, but to abstain shirks that responsibility. Now, I said, unless there's some financial or legal reason, but just to abstain for the sake of it, we shouldn't bow to that. That was 3. 4, and finally, let's hold each other accountable on these things. If we all believe in them, let's hold ourselves accountable for tones of mistrust and call it out. Let's hold ourselves accountable to not being just contrary and call out a point of order. Let's use words like, what's our common? And let's get to that. 4 challenges that I think will make this experience every first and third Monday a whole lot more productive and a whole lot more valuable. And it's what our taxpayers expect and deserve. And let's begin it tonight. So a final remark, Mr. Nord, you typically like to go on your Facebook and do sort of a video recap of the night's events. Very clever. Very clever way to connect with your followers, with your friends, with your base. If you believe in anything I've said tonight, then I challenge you specifically to talk more about the us and our team, as opposed to feeding a narrative of me versus the world. Let's start it tonight. And to the rest of us, let's talk about how we are going to really rededicate ourselves to working together to find that common good. I don't know how much time I took up of your evening. I know it's getting late, but thank you very much. This has been on my heart. It's been on my mind.
and we need to do better. Thank you.
And Mr. Nord, you had comments?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just had two topics I wanted to talk about briefly. One of them is the VA clinic that's in Bloomington. I'm sure you're all aware that this is a regional clinic. So veterans are coming from all over the region. They come by Amtrak, they come by Greyhound, they come by whatever means they can to get here. Now, most of them will not know about the mobility service. And for those traveling, the pickup windows for this mobility service that Connect has just makes it prohibitive. Now, even Connect Transit says that this mobility service is not supposed to be the primary route. The primary route that folks are supposed to use, even if they're disabled, is the fixed bus route service. This is on their website. Now, the clinic, in order for the clinic to get additional specialties added to help not only our veterans, but to also help the economy by hiring additional staff, bringing additional people in here, this clinic needs to be accessible so that way more people will use it. Otherwise the specialties just won't come. So, you know, in the Veterans Corner, which is an article in the Panagraph that comes out, Jerry Vogler, he's with the Veterans Assistance Commission, he had recently written an article about the stop at the Veterans Clinic. Art Rodriguez with AMVETS, he emailed the council, or he included us in an email where he, was addressing this issue with the higher ups at the AMVETS. At the American Legion Hall here in Normal, post 635, that's a constant, or it's a very reoccurring conversation and topic on the agenda. At the VFW in Bloomington, at the post there's been discussions there about this stop as well. So this facility is new. It's unique. Within Illinois, according to the AMVETS, this is the only VA clinic in all of Illinois that doesn't have a fixed route bus stop. And it is the second one in the entire US. This is according to the AMVETS. So I was contacted by the AMVETS here earlier, well, I guess it would have been recently here over the past few days. And I wanted to acknowledge the mayor. I wanted to thank you because they said that you had reached out to them and that you're going to be working with them on this issue. So thank you for doing that. And my only request is that after you have those conversations, that you come back to the council and kind of update us as to what's going on, because it's important to me. It's important to our constituents. And I know it's important to you as well. So I just wanted to recognize you and thank you. My next topic, which I'll keep it short, is that we have quite a few sweetheart rental deals where the amount we collect in rent is nowhere near what the cost taxpayers incur for even maintaining these facilities. Tonight, there was one where the town collects $2 a year for a property. You know, we have a $7,000 expense. We'll never see that paid in our lifetime. There's another one where we collect $120 a year for both a residence and a business space. You know, plus we pay the mowing, the snow, the property tax, and nearly all the other expenses. Now, some of these contracts, and these are just two, okay? Now, some of these contracts have an auto-renew feature. And this feature allows the contract to be auto-renewed unless the council, us, explicitly vote to change the contract or cancel the contract. Now, in order for us to end a contract or change it, often there's an advance notice clause, which may push the actual impact of the change to happen years or possibly even to a different council to take care of. Well, to be open and transparent to not only the public, but also for all current and future council members, I think the council should know clearly what we are approving without our knowledge and without an explicit public vote. Because if these auto renew, our names are attached to that. We were on council when that happened. So what I'm requesting is that town staff provide the council, the entire council, the calendar of all the leases, including the advance notice dates, the auto renew dates, the end dates, so that we can better make fiscal decisions for our constituents instead of having these things get approved and we not even know about it. So thank you, and I hope everyone has a good evening.
And a motion for adjournment.
I so move.
Thank you.
Second.
Please call them. Oh, Mr. McCarthy, you were trying to find that hand up.
I won't delay a lot. Couple of things that I hadn't planned to say. I want to dovetail on one thing Ms. Lorenz talked about staff and morale. I had the opportunity a number of years ago to work with one of the largest hospital groups in Southern California, and it was staff investment, leadership development, week-long work session, and their internal survey results were that they found out that their customers, patients in their hospitals across California, were happiest by one single factor, and that single factor was happy employees. And what they found out through continued survey is that how do you make happy employees? Two factors raised to the top. The first was trust. The second was responsibility giving. So trust and responsibility of staff equaled happy staff equaled happy customers that they serve. This is at the top end of healthcare in the United States. Applies to all customer service and service-based industries. I'd be interested to go back, haven't been back there in a long time to see how that's evolved, but an opportune time to share some of that research out in light of some of Ms. Lorenz's comments. What I did want to remind everybody, a couple of things. One is the Children's Discovery Museum Craft Bingo is continuing to go on through the end of the month. If you care about the Children's Discovery Museum or kids programming in our community, go buy a bingo card. It's only $15. Then go get stamps at our local breweries and support small businesses in our community. You get to do that. They donate some money back to the Children's Discovery Museum. The Children's Discovery Museum gets a card. You have till the end of the month to get that done. So if you've got another week, please go do that. If you haven't yet, anybody paying attention or watching online, 2020 census, it's still an opportunity for you to go out and participate. Go to 2020census.gov or go to the town's Facebook page. You can click on that and find out how to participate online. And last but not least, if you are not feeling well at all, go get tested. I got tested last week myself. Sat in the line out in the Interstate Center and went in. And I'm here to tell you it's not as bad as some of the people that were talking to me were fearful it was. It was not necessarily pleasant. A little bit of a brain tickler. But if you have any doubts, please go get in line. It's a safe, painless process. A little bit uncomfortable, but well worth it. Happy to report I'm negative. But please go do that if you have any doubt about your health status. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. And we'll revert back to Mr. Nord's motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mayor Coos?
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you and good night.